Hello world of YouTube and welcome to yet another episode of Redacted, the show where I take a look at records that have a solid foundation but a spotty execution, and pulling projects together to make a smoother listening experience. And this month we've got one that I've been sitting on for a hot minute, that I've talked about here and there on the channel. I'm finally dropping this month. It's a record that has continued to grow for me personally as one that I really enjoy. And while I could see both my initial and the general consensus initial underwhelmment with the project in comparison to other recent releases this artist has done, I feel like by fine-tuning your gaze or just incorporating other elements of projects he was dropping around the same time, I made a project that felt more like what it was initially pitched as. I'm talking about the latest record from one of my favorite rappers to drop over the last decade, Big K.R.I.T, the guy Big K.R.I.T, talking about his 2019 record, K.R.I.T is Here.
That was them, this is me, this is King, you ain't know. K.R.I.T here, sound like this, my you, type of car we don't steal.
I think a big issue people had with this project is that it was his first independent studio record that had him hopping on a lot of other people's production and presenting something that was a little more tepid and a little more in line with a lot of what the scene was doing. And in comparison to Big K.R.I.T's sound in general, a lot of his career was staying in his own sort of realm, really worshiping the South, and that all kind of culminated into an apex in 2017 with his album Forever Is a Mighty Long Time, which was an incredible double album that saw him both paying tribute to the South, being reflective on his time personally and in the spotlight, and it was just an incredible record that I felt like acted like a send-off to the era that he had been delving into for the last decade. And K.R.I.T is Here, while a sequel to his breakout mixtape K.R.I.T Was Here, it also acts as a sort of page-turner. While he, again, does a lot of the reflection and a lot of the other stuff, and he still pays tribute to the South, it's in a very contemporary sense. And I feel like, in comparison to K.R.I.T Was Here, it feels like a good sort of counterpoint to a lot of the sounds on K.R.I.T Was Here. That's something that I even took issue with, like I said in my initial review. I didn't like that he was, a lot of the beats he decided to hop on. I thought some worked and some didn't. I thought some of the tracks didn't work. And I was shocked that he didn't pull too much from the TDT compilation, the 3 EPs he dropped the year prior. And basically what I did to make it a better listening experience was incorporate tracks from the TDT EPs, not the mixtape, the TDT compilation. I took out some of the tracks and interludes that I feel like didn't do anything for me, and injected songs that reinforced a lot of the themes of reflection, some of the more love-leaning tracks, and just the Southern tributes in general he had continued to explore lyrically throughout the TDT project, and brought them more into K.R.I.T Is Here. I also added a single that he dropped after K.R.I.T Is Here dropped that he played on tour, and when it dropped, I was like, yeah, if I'm redacting this project, this needs to go on here for sure. And if you follow Big K.R.I.T, you know exactly what I'm talking about. My version of the record is 2 tracks less, but is the same length as K.R.I.T Is Here. So I kept it the same pace, I just made it a little tighter conceptually. But with the sort of setup out of the way, these are the tracks that I kept, and why.
I'm proposing the toast, made it out the hood like, yeah, who would've thought? It's an uphill battle, no pedal for this. Closed curtain when a circle, phone ringing on the hill. Nah, hit the hater with the mid call. Same number, let it drill, let it sink. Motherfuck your battleship, I been waiting. Flight, that shit was oh so right. I had to dive in twice. Ain't no safety belt. High, I fly, skydive, high five, we won't die. I'm for the birds, watch for them laws. Nigga, they dirty as dirt. I know you wanna be the bigger person if all they wanna do is hurt you. Drive by, I'm like, that's my car. Fast forward, stack forward, nigga, where your chill lead. Got me way above the rim. I'ma make it obvious for shit so big you think I'll meet you. my niggas live real good. We sleeping tired, they had to wake from my base. Knocking in the motherfucking made to have a maid. It ain't laid though. That what you made back. What? I don't really know her, but I know her well. The only thing I just wanna come down one day, round one day. Can they bang that whistle around? Shut her down. I gotta be out, yeah. You need to breathe now. A grown man to a king so I can shine. Like right.
Now, I kept KRIT here as the opening because it is just a great barn burner. It's a great stage setter. Like I said in my Songs of the Year list last year, this is a great opening track. It starts a set off really well too, because again, he started his set off live with it, and it's a great just hype track to get the crowd and the listener really engaged with what he's doing. And the problem I faced with following that up is because a lot of the record and a lot of what TDT had doesn't throttle that energy anywhere. You know, the song ends with this really nice sort of drum fill, but the song has so much energy, I had to think of where to took it, and I figured I would just transition that drum fill into another drum line of every time. And you'll notice a big thing that I tried to do was keep tonally the album going, keep the vibe extended, while having those themes that I talked about explored more thoroughly, just sort of sprinkled throughout the runtime. But I have Every Time after that, which is just a nice little smooth track that has a nice little piano melody, a nice, creamy hook, and KRIT just rides over it really well before sort of amping things up a little bit thematically, because the album is called KRIT Is Here, and it's about, KRIT's name, the king remembered in time is finally here, his time is now, seemingly, and Glorious is a reflection while also talking about how it feels to be at the top. It's a nice sort of cold trap beat. Again, I'm surprised it didn't end up on this record because the beat on Glorious matches a lot of the beats on KRIT Is Here, and it's a great track. And it's a moment just kind of to transition through the next couple of tracks on the record after Every Time, because I've Been Waitin' is another sort of smooth, cold trap beat that talks about KRIT's tenure in the mainstream, his time built up to this moment, before going into one of the bigger singles off of this record, a good pop moment with Addiction, that is one of a few moments where KRIT gets to work with an icon of the South. And he worked with Lil Wayne on this record, and I had to keep it. Even if it's not necessarily my favorite song on the record, I do like the song. I think it's fine enough, and I like Wayne's contribution. I think it's cool to see Wayne work with a dude like KRIT, a dude that I've been holding so dear for so long. It's cool to see sort of KRIT get that kind of nod from an icon of that general area. And after that, I sort of bleed into one of the other catchier songs that kind of acts as a sort of call to arms for the record with Energy, which is a great track, and it was another song that he played live that I really enjoyed that sort of got the crowd involved in what he was doing, pleading to kind of ramp things up to get things a little more amped up, which I kind of do bleeding into For the Three, which is another tribute to the South, and it's just a banger made for the Southern artists, and it's a great beat. And again, it feels like it's weird because one of the other complaints people had about KRIT Is Here is there weren't enough beats like For the Three. They just had a lot of rumbling low end, because that's one of an iconic slice of KRIT's sound is he is good at trunk knockers. And I feel like For the Three is a good trunk knocker with a dope hook and just a nice smooth little Southern banger that bleeds. And to prove it, another track featuring an icon from the Southern part of the United States, Cole. He's more of in the sort of mid-South, but he's another dude from that area who is really beloved and working with KRIT once again, because they've worked together in the past. But it's cool to see them come together and talk about being big, but really, again, sort of like Energy, showing how dependent and how appreciative they are of their fan bases, and KRIT, like Cole, has very dedicated fans. While I'm not as big of a fan of Cole as I am of KRIT, I get it, and that's this song kind of encapsulates that. Cole's contribution in particular, I actually really enjoy. It really enhances the themes of the track and actually showcases, his love for his ride or die day one fans, you know, by paying tribute to one in particular. I really appreciate that, and I bleed that into another Southern infused beat with Pick Yourself Up, which is about picking yourself up, not needing anybody else, being an independent person, which is another aspect of this record. You know, this is K.R.I.T's independent debut. You know, he's not on a label. He's not on a mixtape circuit. He's just a dope-ass, you know, independent debut. He talks about it on Pick Yourself Up, and it's another sort of acting as a sonic shift to more of the more energetic cuts that are going to follow on the record. Not necessarily with the immediate next track. It's another point where the record's sort of just kind of shifting from the drearier, drowsier, trap-infused moments into more optimistic, hype shit. But it also talks about just picking yourself up across the board, whether you're a woman who's not really needing a man. You can flex your own wealth. You can pick yourself up from the roots and thrive in your own sense. You know, it's a good motivational song that bleeds into Obvious, which is a love song. I really like this track, and I originally had it earlier in the track listing because it kind of has a murkier instrumental, but I kind of used it as another shift into this optimistic half, or this less murky half, because while it does have that sort of soft instrumental, it's a point where K.R.I.T is a lot more lively in his delivery, and I felt like that was a sort of another signifier to that shift. And I love Rico Love's hook on there. It's very Drake-esque. And I like the song. It's a cute little love song that, again, it's not the only time that there's a track like this on here. It's one of the more sparsely touched on ideas, but it's something that I wanted to still have because I like when K.R.I.T does a love song really well. And again, it's another facet of his personality that I feel like should still be represented on a record. But then I go from that to Make It Easy, which is another just soulful, lush, more boisterous leaning tune with a slamming instrumental, and K.R.I.T sounds a lot more, again, energetic on it. And similarly to Pick Yourself Up, it's about making life easier, being sort of an uplifting energy to the listeners and to the general scene. You know, it's a nice sort of counterpoint to Pick Yourself Up in energy and sort of the follow-up to those ideals planted earlier on the record. It's just another bigger, more bright, shinier, lyrical song that then fades into the sub song, because K.R.I.T loves him some sub-centric tunes. And when he played Ballad of the Bass live, I was like, yes, I love the beat of this song. The bass rattles. It's another just ballad or another tribute to subs, to subwoofers, to low-end aspects of music. And the low end of the song rumbles and hits hard. It's not the only moment now on this record that does that with my redaction, but it's a moment that the record in general was very much needed. The sort of sub saga is a big thing within K.R.I.T's records. You know, the Subenstein from Forever Was a Mighty Long Time, My Sub, Return of Forever. There's always aspects of sub bass low end, and I felt like if you're going to have a record that not only pays tribute to your first mixtape, but also sort of act as a sort of full circle moment, you gotta have it in there, man. And so I put it in here. And then I had another sort of comeback, or another sort of follow-up to an earlier track, Been Waitin, with I Made It, with a hella breezy. It's a nice sort of track that just, again, it's a hype up track where K.R.I.T's just talking about how he's finally here. He's finally at the top. He's finally in a place where he feels like he really is a king in his lane. And it's a great tune. It's a great fucking song. You know, again, it's got a really good, harder hitting beat, but it doesn't have the same sort of murkiness that was on the first half of the record. And it acts as a sort of, again, response to a track from earlier in the track listing. That bleeds into another reflective point on the record higher, that acts as another sort of continuation in a saga that K.R.I.T's continued with the King Part 6. It acts as another point where K.R.I.T sits in front of sort of a proverbial reflective point and talks about just kind of dissecting things that he's been through over the last couple of years. And it acts as another sort of bleed-in track that kind of ties into a lot of the themes that the record goes into. It's not quite as tight as I Made It or Learn from Texas, but it acts as sort of a lyrical interlude that's a little more substantive. It goes from there into Learn from Texas, another tribute to the South, another sort of tribute to an aspect within Southern hip-hop, Texas, the whole Texas scene. talking a lot about in tribute to a lot of what K.R.I.T loves about Texas hip hop, and I love that track. It's one of the few tracks from the TDT compilation that made it onto K.R.I.T Is Here, and I love that he put it on there, and I had to keep it because I love that track. I love the beat. I think it slaps. I think it's a really fucking good song that K.R.I.T nailed tribute to directly on the head. And I figured I'd have the penultimate song be something a little more cute, another sort of love song that sort of acts as one more sort of pullback from an earlier track in the record with 100, which is another just cute-ass love song that has a nice sort of throwback sounding beat with a cutesy vocal line sampled, and K.R.I.T just having a nice sort of catchy-ass love song that talks about someone who's been his rock, been someone who's kept it 100 with him. And I really appreciate that, the sentiment in that song, and I wanted to have it somewhere. And I felt like that acted as a good, again, another sort of sonic buffer between Learned from Texas and Mississippi, which I kept as the closer because it's a hell of a closing track. It's a great tribute to where K.R.I.T is from. It acts as a nice bookend from his, again, huge, boisterous opening to have a huge, boisterous closer with some nice rootsier instrumentation. That bass on that song sounds fucking crisp, and I like it. I like it a lot. I feel like it ends the record well. It's a good sort of send-off to this record that was supposed to act as K.R.I.T's a certified dominance as a king in the scene, and I feel like it does that really well. Even if it has the older guys at the end that were in the skit earlier in the record, I cut the skit that they were in because, I mean, it's a good lead-in to Been Waitin, but I wanted to have, again, a tight-ass experience, and I feel like them being there randomly doesn't detract. It just acts as a sort of outro to the record that's there. But it's a good closer, and I love that track. I think it's a good tribute to K.R.I.T's home, something that he does a lot, and I felt like having it be a closer just made a lot of sense. Now, as for why I cut a track like Outer Space, because even though I love that track, I think it's incredible, and I love this sort of subject, because y'all know I love space. I just didn't really find a place for it to fit. And I think it is a really good song, and I think it fits the record really well. Sonically, that same murky kind of sounds, but I couldn't find a place for it. There's also a handful of other tracks that I cut, like High Beams and Life in the Sun and Family Matters, because even though I really like them, there were other tracks that I just liked more. The one track that I really probably should have kept just because it acts as another sort of tribute and another sincere moment on the track listing is Believe. That's a well-written track that I feel like does do a good job at paying homage to black figures, and I could see somebody wanting to include it on the record, and I probably could have kept it here. And looking back, I really probably should have. But a track like Blue Flame Ballet I cut just because, listen, I love stripper anthems. Stripper anthems are great. When K.R.I.T played this live, it was a great time. But I would not say it's my favorite track on K.R.I.T Is Here. And I cut it for a very particular reason, because I couldn't make it fit the record. You know, the only track I feel like I probably could have kept was Believe out of the ones I cut. And I could see somebody, again, in the comments making a Redacted with Believe on there. If you have, I don't blame you. It is a great song. It's another one of those cases where I was just cutting, and, you know, it was just a point that I didn't keep. That's my Redacted on K.R.I.T Is Here. What did you think about it? Did you like this particular episode? I love talking about Big K.R.I.T. Any chance I get to talk about Big K.R.I.T, you know I'm going to do so, because I think he's an incredible artist. I think he's a great writer. I think he's a good rhymer. I think he's a great producer. And I think even though he decided to tackle other people's beats on this particular project in vain of other stuff he's done before, I think he did a decent job on it. I just think that it could have used a little more injections from his TDT compilation that dropped the year prior. But I'm happy with this version of K.R.I.T Is Here for the most part. I hope you are. If you do like this version, let me know in the comments down below. If you have your own redaction for this record as well, leave it in the comments down below. If you did like this particular video, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdary content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or help drive the community, it's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here, though. I have been Viral Rack. You guys will get his lives and situations, and I'll see you another day.
Mike in the jelly gon' snitch. I run the room with the witch. I flip a fifth of the witch. I smoke a dub in the tub. Then I was flip on her wrist. Peace.